Schopenhauer's philosophy on women is unsettling, not simply because it contains bitterness or hostility, but because it's built on something far more disarming and difficult to confront: an unflinching, unapologetic honesty that refuses to hide behind polite illusions. Whether you agree with him or not, his words have echoed across nearly 2 centuries, not because they were warm or encouraging, but because they strike at something raw, something most people instinctively avoid. Many don't truly want the truth. They want the comfort of agreeable civility, the elegance of equality presented in safe, palatable terms, the reassurance of conclusions that don't disturb the heart. But Schopenhauer never cared for comfort. He sought clarity, and his particular brand of clarity, especially on the subject of women, has made him one of the most polarizing figures in the history of philosophy. He did not hide behind ornate metaphors, nor did he romanticize gender relations or soften his message to win approval. He described what he saw without varnish, and what he saw unsettled him deeply. To peer through his lens, even briefly, is to risk encountering the same discomfort, the realization that some of what he observed still lingers, perhaps uncomfortably intact. His worldview began with a grim foundation. He did not regard life as a divine gift, but rather as a kind of trap, an endless cycle of struggle and suffering propelled by a blind, irrational force he called the will. This will was not reason, not spirit, not morality, was raw, unrelenting desire. The hunger that drives all life, manifesting as the urge to survive and reproduce, even when existence itself brings pain. Within this machinery of biological compulsion, he believed women were not mystical, elevated beings, but pragmatic instruments of nature, strategically designed to perpetuate the species rather than to pursue truth. To him, femininity was not evil, it was functional. Women are by nature intended to obey. They belong to the second class. He wrote a statement that would ignite outrage today, but which he insisted was not an accusation of weakness. Instead, he argued that women's value in nature's brutal logic came from preservation, not from risk, power, or truth-seeking. Men, in his eyes, were agents of history-shaping war, philosophy, invention, while women anchored life through reproduction, domesticity, and the glue of social cohesion. He saw this not as an injustice, but as biology in action. Schopenhauer had no interest in idealistic visions. He believed in the ruthless function of systems, and once you strip away sentimentality and stop romanticizing relationships, he argued, the cold mechanics of desire and selection reveal themselves with unnerving clarity. In his view, relationships were rarely pure unions of love. More often they were exchanges. Attraction was seldom about the solid, was about utility. Seduction, loyalty, and emotional expression, he believed, were less spiritual gifts than evolutionary strategies. He argued that women embodied these strategies instinctively, not with conscious malice, but because nature had equipped them for influence in a world where men held physical dominance. Nature has armed woman more than man for the ensnaring of man's heart. She possesses the art of dissimulation, of cunning, of flattery, of graceful lying in a word, of hypocrisy, he wrote, describing not a moral failing but a survival adaptation. In his eyes, women's power came not from force, but from subtle charm, emotional appeal, and the creation of alluring illusions. And most men, he claimed, fell victim to those illusions, loving not the reality of a woman, but the idealized projection they had built in their own minds. He saw marriage as a form of entrapment, romance as a biological trick, loyalty as a temporary alignment sustained by instinct rather than principle. Men, he believed, were enslaved by their desire, and women were nature's merchants of that. Slavery not by choice, but by design. The uncomfortable truth, as he framed it, was that nature does not care for fairness, purity, or equality. It cares only for continuation. And in this game, a man in love is a man without sovereignty, surrendering logic for lust, exchanging independence for the illusion of belonging. Schopenhauer, far from hating women, pitied men who believed they were in control when, in his eyes, they were the hunted. He saw women as nature's perfected weapon, and the weapon was working as intended. To modern ears, much of this feels one-sided, perhaps like the outpouring of a man who had never truly been loved, and perhaps that's so, but he never pretended to be balanced or comforting. His mission was to articulate what others avoided, the unvarnished truth that beneath love's fantasy lay biology, beneath affection lay instinct, and behind beauty often lay strategy. For him, this was not cynicism, was nature operating with brutal perfection. And the reason it still matters is because the illusion he described has not disappeared. It lives on in media, in dating, in the countless ways men still surrender purpose for fleeting attention. His warnings remain relevant because men still confuse validation with love, loyalty with obligation, attraction with destiny. What he wanted men to see was not evil in women, but blindness in themselves. Their failure to recognize that what they call romance may be a carefully packaged biological transaction. He claimed women's decisions were rarely based on abstract justice but on security, utility, and emotional immediacy, not cruelty, but design. The tragedy, in his view, was that men mistake predictability and constant availability for virtue, never realizing that what is always easy to have is seldom respected. He believed most men loved not from strength but from dependency, mistaking their own hunger to be chosen as proof of love's purity, while women, governed by instinct, chose those who radiated strength, detachment, and self-possession. To him, nature rewarded scarcity, not submission, strategy, not sentiment. He even mocked the romanticization of women's physical form, arguing that the pedestal men placed women on was built more from lust than reason. His core message was that most heartbreak is not the product of female malice, but of male self-deception. And this, he believed, was the bitter medicine men must see, that their worth is not defined by what they give away, but by what they can withhold, by the independence they maintain. It was not about becoming cold, but about becoming unshakably centered, immune to the seduction of approval. For him, emotional independence was the highest form of strength, the ability to walk away without resentment, to say no without guilt, to never surrender identity for acceptance. Marrying means to have one's rights and double one's duties, he warned, seeing in marriage the ultimate symbol of a man's surrender to an arrangement that might demand far more than it gave in return. He rejected the societal training that told men their value lay in making women happy or defining success through partnership. For Schopenhauer, no truth was worth the price of your freedom, and no affection was worth the loss of your soul. In the end, his philosophy is difficult to digest, not because it is an attack on women, but because it is a mirror held up to men, forcing them to see how often they destroy themselves in the name of love. And until a man breaks the spell of illusionment, till he can see romance, sex, and affection not as salvation but as trials of instinct, he will never truly be free. The moment you stop seeking completion from someone else, the moment you no longer make your peace conditional on another's presence, is the moment you become immune, not cruel, but untouchable in the best way. That is what he wanted you to understand. The pain is not in women. It is in your unexamined hunger to be loved. Once you see this clearly, you stop playing the game entirely. And in doing so, you win by default, because nothing and no one can use you again.